So we both have ministry pages. Yours is very focused around, what would you say is the main focus of yours? I know
Yeah,
it's
I would
but
say our social media page that I'm running right now is just, it was kind of started as an avenue to just reach a broader audience and a younger audience with the message of Jesus' soon return and, our
yeah,
desire for the church to be seeking after that. In an age where it seems like the church corporately is growing very comfortable with just the
mhm,
status quo and just the ways of the world, honestly, not longing for our home in heaven.
right.
And so that's kind of our mission. Keeping the hope alive of Jesus' soon return is kind of our mission. And so I started this page in order to kind of reach more people with that. And so it's been good. It seems the Lord has been blessing it, and we post things from sermons that people give, whether it's me or somebody else, not really affiliated with any church, just particularly to share the message, and that could be anybody.
That was my kid. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, that's awesome. I noticed you have a decent amount of followers. I know you've got more than I do. At least I think.
I'm not sure. I think right now the quarantine has been interesting. We've kind of grown a little bit during this season, but I feel like it's kind of a positive and a negative because so many people are on social media even more than normal.
Right.
And so it's like you do have some exposure there, but also so does everyone else. And so, kind of trying to cut through the vast, just onslaught of content that people are bombarded with all the time has been kind of my goal with the page. And to use it as kind of a surface level hook, if you will, to bring people into the message and to bring them into the opportunity to hear more that may be like longer content on YouTube or something else.
Mhm. Yeah, that's what I typically do. Is my long stuff is on YouTube.
Yeah, yeah,
I may
exactly.
love it on Instagram, but
Yeah.
so I don't think I've gotten your actual name yet, which is kind
So my name is Chris.
of Chris.
Yeah,
Okay,
Chris Jack.
I have a nephew named Chris, so
It's a good name.
I think he's over on the East Coast.
I
Um,
actually grew up in Virginia Beach. And
okay,
yeah, so very familiar with the East Coast area and would kind of drive up and down the coast to different places to visit family and whatnot. I moved here when I was 18 to Texas to go to
oh,
school.
so you came to the promised land then. Okay.
That's right. As quick as I could. As quick as I could. No, and honestly, I love Texas. Became a resident here, and man, I probably will never leave. You hate to say that, but just so many roots planted with business and with family and with churches and ministries, and it seems like the Lord has really planted me and my family in this greater Austin area.
Yeah, that's the same for us here over in East Texas. So,
Hmm. Word.
um, so as far as testimonies go, I'll start asking those questions. Did you grow up in church or not? How was life like during those times?
Yeah, so I did grow up in church. I'm super grateful to my parents and my family, who were kind of the first generation in our family to
Hmm.
get serious about their relationship with the Lord. I feel like my grandparents were really solid, good people, but they didn't necessarily make it a priority in the home to teach the kids about God and to follow His ways, which is what it's really about in the home. And so my parents were the first ones to really make that a priority. In fact, even though we didn't have a lot of money growing up, they made sure to send me to a private Christian school growing up. And, to them, that was very important. So they went without a lot, and our family went without a lot in order to prioritize, our finances to do that. And so now looking back, I have 3 kids of my own now, and I realize every day, I'm more and more grateful for that. As I grew up, I'd say I was about 13 years old when I came to know the Lord personally. What if I could look back at a certain moment and say, hey, that was like a turning point in my life? It would probably be at 13. I grew up Baptist. And so I was at a Ken Freeman. He's an evangelist that just went all around the the country, all over the world in the 90s, early 2000s. He may be still doing it. I don't know. But he came to our church and he gave a revival. You know, he had one of those stories that's just like, it went to ground, you know, like ground zero, and just his life totally fell apart. Very moving, very emotional. And as I heard that story, you know, I just decided that it was time for me to give my life to the Lord, whatever that meant for a 13-year-old, obviously. And I look back at that as a real turning point, I would say. But there was a time a few years before that, when I was in the 5th grade, and so I guess about 10 or 11 years old, and I was actually exposed to pornography at that time. And this was something that we recently did, you know, that class, and I think you actually helped us promote it, so thank you for that. And it was really cool. We had over 20,000 views total on that series, people from more than 25 different countries, and over 600 people that actually registered for the course. So I'm really, really excited about what God is doing with that, and I'm excited to rerun it. But kind of the reason I was so set on doing that series was because I was exposed to pornography as a young kid, you know, prepubescent. And so it's like, wow, you really get your feet cut out from under you before you even learn to walk. And so that was an issue for me, you know, for the next decade of my life. And as I talk about my testimony, you know, I think that played a huge role in my understanding of who God was. And it led me in my mind, like, to not really be able to connect with the Lord the way that I would have wanted to because of my rebellion and my sin. And, you know, addictions are interesting to talk about, like, theologically and things, and how we keep going back to the same thing. But that was a huge thing for me. And so when the Lord brought freedom into my life about 10 years later, now I'm on a mission to take what the enemy intended for evil and to use it for good.
Yeah, and that's what the Bible does tell us, is what Satan wants to do, use to destroy us, as God can use to rebuild us.
Amen.
And
yeah.
So that's something I've wanted to get into myself. That's why I have that Instagram page. I call it Advent Purity for that purpose.
That's cool.
I've been through some of the same struggles. And so, my chair's rolling too much. Want to say hi?
Hello, how are you?
And so what would you, how did, was it like a rock bottom thing, or did you just find it to be not very satisfying?
Yeah, so originally, you know, when I started getting into that, things kind of lead one thing to another, and it becomes more and more out of control. And so in my mind and in my heart, you know, I began to objectify women. I began to just lose sight of, like, the value of people, and what comes with that is just seeking the next truly unobtainable satisfaction or pleasure, and it can never satisfy. It's never enough, and this goes across the board. But for me, that's where it was going, and I tried and tried and tried, and I made, like, you know, deals with God and stuff, which I was unable to keep. And I'm a musician, and so I lead worship all the time, all over the city of Austin and even the state, and the country sometimes. And so part of that, that was such a big deal for me. I ended up getting a degree in piano performance in college, and it was such a huge thing. And so when I was wrestling with this, I told God, okay, you know, I will not lead worship, or, like, it sounds funny, or, like, play music or anything for 1 month. Like, I'll fast to just show you, like, I'm serious about this and this struggle, and I don't know really what to do. So I just thought that maybe fasting would be the answer. And so I did that. And of course, you know, it was only a few weeks after I was right back into the normal swing of things, because the issue was with, you know, things that I hadn't dealt with myself, which were leading me down that path. So anyways, I continued to digress and decline. I would thought, you know, once I'm 13, once I'm 16, once I'm 18, I'm an adult, I will have kicked this habit. And then it never did. And so once I was an adult, I said, you know, the answer must be being married. Like, that's the answer. And that'll help me, because then I'll have, you know, an avenue, morally or legally, according to God's law, to do this. But that also wasn't the answer. And so the first year into my marriage, I continued to struggle. And it wasn't until I had a conversation with my wife, where she just was truly truly broken and truly just devastated. She didn't know about my addiction. And I realized that the extent to which I was harming her without her even knowing it, and that this was on my shoulders as a man. And if one day I want to be a good husband, I want to raise kids in God's ways, and I'm just basically crippling myself and my family. And I was so hurt and so devastated by the weight of my choices. The Lord He did something in my heart and in my mind in that moment. And since that moment, it's been now 6 years since I've watched anything inappropriate like that. And the Lord brought a season into my life next where there was a pastor who approached me and asked me to lead a class in person in Austin on sexual addiction. And my response to that pastor, at first I was like, yeah, let me check into that or whatever. But then I just never got back, because my wife still didn't know at this point, even though it had been a few years since I had watched pornography. My wife still didn't know that I had ever struggled, especially a year into our marriage. In fact, I had lied about it. And so I'm thinking, okay, good. I'm not struggling with this anymore. I'm right with God. Now I don't have to bring anything up to my wife or to anybody else. Nobody has to know. And I can maintain this image of perfection, and people can look at that. And so that was a really bad place to be. And so after about a week, the Lord He was dealing with my heart on that and saying, is your pride, is your arrogance, where you want to maintain this false image, this false God of a picture of yourself and in perfection, is that worth sacrificing the calling that I'm giving you, that I'm placing on your life? I want you to use this story, use this testimony to bless and encourage other men, especially, and to help men find freedom from this terrible, devastating addiction. And so I realized what the Lord was calling me to, but I knew that I had to share it with my wife first and to come clean with her so that we could journey through the healing process, hopefully, together. And so that's what we did. I shared with her one day, and it truly was devastating, and it's about a 6-month process for she and I of coming to a new place in our marriage and rebuilding trust and rebuilding bond, and trying to help her understand the nature of the addiction, that it wasn't something that she wasn't enough. It was something that, came up and does. The average age of exposure for young men today is 11 years old, average. So I was trying to explain, this is something that has been affecting me since long before I knew you, before I hit puberty. Like, it's been an issue in my life. It has nothing to do with you. And so as we journeyed through that together, the Lord, He really did a powerful work, and our marriage now is just so much stronger than it ever was before. In fact, I wear this watch. She gave me this watch, and it's a really nice watch. It's actually a conversation starter because people will comment on it. And I'll say, what's really cool about this watch actually is not just the watch itself, but on the back of it, my wife had inscribed, and I don't even know if you can see that, but it says, "I'd choose you again." And so after we came through that process together, she gave me that. And for me, it's like a symbol, it's like something that I wear to remind myself of what we've been through together and what the Lord is doing now with that testimony.
Yeah. And I can kind of relate to that, because I've been through the same struggle, and I don't know where I'd be without my wife and the grace she's shown me.
So good. Yes. The Bible says a man who finds a godly wife finds a good thing, a treasure.
Yeah.
It's so true.
So then how did the two of you meet?
Yeah, so we met when I was 18 years old. I moved from Virginia Beach, and I came to Austin, Texas. I was actually going around the country auditioning for scholarships at different universities for music, for piano. And so I came across Austin. I was looking at all the big music cities. I looked at Nashville, I looked at New York, I looked at LA, New Orleans, and Austin, which is the live music capital of the world. And so I found a school here that I really liked. I was looking for a smaller Christian school. Again, I'd grown up in private Christian school my whole life and a little bit intimidated by like huge state schools and stuff like that. And so I was looking for something small, private, kind of liberal arts type of university where I could study music with a good program where I could have a scholarship. And so I found Concordia University, which is a Lutheran school here in Austin, Texas. It's one of, I think, like 8 or 9, maybe 10 different Concordias across the country. And I auditioned for some scholarships. I was able to receive some, and I met my now wife. Her name is Lexa. I met her at the school when I was visiting. And that was a pivotal moment for me as well, because I think I was in an inappropriate relationship at the time with a girl back from Virginia. And when this girl, she was not someone who was seeking the Lord, who even claimed to be Christian. She claimed to be agnostic at the time, and I was just living in sin. And so when I met Lexa, even when I just first saw her, I sensed just the Spirit of God in her and just radiating through her and her love. People say, well, what do you mean by that? Radiating through her love for other people and the way she just interacted with people. And you've met people like this, probably your wife, just something different, something special, something anointed. And so when I met her, I instantly fell in love with her. But I realized something really, really that was heavy for me at the time, which was that if I wanted to attract a woman like that, because that's what I wanted in my heart, I was seeking after these other things just viscerally, carnally, but I knew in my heart what I wanted was to be a godly man and to find a godly wife. I knew that. I just wasn't living like that. And so I realized if I wanted to attract a woman like that, I needed to be the kind of man that would be attractive to that kind of woman. And so, the Lord really used that as a not like just to marry someone, because honestly, you could marry anybody you want. You could marry a beautiful person. There's lots of beautiful people, but He shifted my desires towards Him by using me meeting my wife. And so we dated for 3 years, and then got engaged and got married. Now we've been married almost 7 years.
Oh, praise the Lord for that. That's a record nowadays.
Yeah.
So many people get divorced after maybe 5 at most, it seems.
I know, it's so sad. Such broken homes. My wife and I are actually in the process. We adopted a little girl 3 years ago now, and we're in the process of adopting 2 more now. We're fostering them currently, and we want to have kids of our own one day. We haven't really gone down that route, but both of us just feel this calling to adoption, and so we want to just to do that now, even while we're young. And so we're looking at adopting those 2 kids, and truly, it is definitely a calling. But I see the love of God and what He's doing in my own heart to just give like a love for a child that isn't even yours. He just puts it there. And it's just there as if they're your own biological child. So our family is growing in this season. It's funny, during quarantine, finances are taking hits and things like that. My wife isn't even working right now. I have a few different jobs, so the Lord has given me opportunity to have income and support our family through that. But we were going to look at adopting at the beginning of this summer, and when my wife would be off of work. So then, since she's off of work now, we were like, hey, let's just go ahead and move forward. So we have 2 beautiful new kids in our home, Adeline and Gavin. And I'm hoping that hoping is the wrong word. I'm praying that the Lord will guide us in that process, because there's a lot of legal complications and things with the current biological parents. And we're just looking at how He's going to move and just waiting on His hand in that situation.
If there's one thing I've learned, it's when it's the Lord's will, nothing can stand in the way.
Amen. And you get this sense of peace, like a very unnatural peace. Even when there's a lot of questions, there's a lot of concerns or things that you're not sure about, and you just have peace about it. Amazing.
Yeah, especially now with all this virus stuff going around, this crisis that the world is involved in, a lot of people don't have peace.
True.
And the way it sounds like the Lord is using you and your family is a picture of, you may have some challenges like with your foster kids, but it's going to work out. You have this faith, this peace that it's going to work out. Yes, baby. Good.
Sure.
And so, I was going to ask a question and then I forgot.
Hey, we could talk about something that's been a huge part of my life, was my journey towards discovering and learning about the Sabbath. Because for me, like I said, growing up Baptist, that just was not something that was on the radar, And it's so funny, you can grow up your whole life and just never even think about the 4th commandment. And I had done that. I heard preached about it, remember the Sabbath day, keep it holy, and just never even asked the question. And that's funny to me because there's other questions that I did ask my whole life, and I just didn't understand about theology and different things. But the question of the Sabbath, I mean, my wife asked me now, she's like, how did you never, even think about that? I just didn't. And so I know that there's a lot of other people out there too, like me. I know I'm not the only one who just haven't considered certain things, and because the church isn't teaching them or has chosen not to teach them, or because pastors are ignorant and they're only teaching what they've been taught in their seminary, and every seminary is teaching different things. So anyways, when I was dating my wife in college, one day she sat down with me. And so, mind you, she was dating me for 8 months maybe before we even had this conversation. And so I would go to her church and help lead worship and just hang out and stuff. And it was a Sabbath-keeping church, a non-denominational but Sabbath-keeping, I think with a lot of roots in Adventism. And so this church was meeting on the Sabbath and keeping the Sabbath and teaching the Sabbath. And as I went, I just thought it was another Saturday church, because I had been to and played music at a lot of churches that met on Saturdays or Saturday nights. And so it didn't even register with me. And so I think my wife was hoping during that season that I would kind of like pick up on it, but I never did. I'm a little slow, so a little dense. So she sat down with me one day, and I'll never forget, we were in Building C at Concordia University in Austin, and in the Student Center. And we're just hanging out, in between classes or whatever. And she said, hey, Christopher, she called me Christopher, there's something I want to talk to you about. And I'm like, oh, man, I've been here before, in dating and stuff. People's like, oh, I think we need to break up or whatever. And so I was like, oh boy, here we go. And she said, I wanted to ask you about this passage. And so she pulled up Hebrews 4 in her Bible, and we're sitting there in the Student Center, and showed me about how it says there remains a Sabbath rest for the people of God. And I'm like, okay, yeah, it's talking about, like Jesus is our Sabbath rest, and it's talking about the people of Israel, but I didn't really understand about the seventh-day Sabbath. And so as she began to lay it very simply, and for me in my simple brain, about 10, 15 minutes, she talked about the Sabbath and walked me through from Genesis, and then at Sinai, and then what Jesus said about it, and the end times, and it's going to be there forever. The book of Isaiah says we'll come to worship the Lord from Sabbath to Sabbath for all eternity. And so she just talked about it very briefly. And then she said, this is something, I was kind of writing it off. I was like, oh, interesting. I'll look at that. And she's like, this is something, she got real serious, that I need you to consider. This is a big part of my life, she said. And I love you, and I would like to see us get married one day in the future, but I'm asking myself, how are we going to raise children? How are we going to, I'm looking down the road and I'm seeing conflict. So I just want you, she's very gentle and very wise with me, because I'm kind of prideful and arrogant. And so if someone tells me that something is right, it's like, okay, wait a second, but I'll be defensive. But if she just presented me with an opportunity to study something that I'd never studied before, very wise. And so I was very receptive, and I said, okay, yeah, I'll take a look at that, and I'll talk with you, in about a week or two or whatever, about this. And so I started digging, and this has been the mantra of my life, coming out of religion, and that could be any religious system, no matter which one is true or whatever, like just believing things because someone said it, because a pastor said it, because my Bible teacher told me. Whether it's true or not, doesn't matter. Is it me understanding, seeking after the Word of God because I love the Word of God and I want to pursue Him and pursue His presence and His truth? Or is it me just believing whatever I was born into? And this is the reason less than 5% of people leave the religious institutions that they were born into, because people aren't willing to challenge tradition. Generally, it means conflict. And so I began to search this out, and I came very quickly to the realization that the Sabbath day was something that God instituted at creation, and that, like I said, He reinstated or emphasized would be a better word at Sinai, and then continued obviously through the Old Testament. And I began to talk with pastors and mentors and leaders in my life who were Sunday keepers, and who believed that the Sabbath was done away with at the cross. It was nailed to the cross. And so I began to discuss with them, and they just weren't able to answer these questions satisfactorily to me. And the more I studied, the more convinced I became, especially when I started reading in Isaiah about it being an eternal thing, when I started understanding the difference between the Mosaic law and the eternal covenant law, which God calls the Ten Commandments. As I started exploring Jesus' words in Matthew 24, where he says, pray that your flight in the end times will not take place in the winter or on a Sabbath day. It's like, wow, if Jesus was about to do away with it, how come he said, you better pray that your flight doesn't take place on the Sabbath thousands of years in the future? It didn't make sense to me. So I just became very convicted, and it became a staple over the years in my life to where it's something I'm super passionate about. Just 2-3 months ago, I had a chance to speak at a ministry school here in Austin called the Heart of David, and to teach on the Sabbath and what it means. So really cool.
So how has that then been an experience of drawing you closer to God? Because to me that's what the Sabbath is all about. Ezekiel says it's a sign that he sanctifies us.
Yeah, that's good.
So how has that been an experience in your life and in the life of your family?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. My wife's family has kept the Sabbath for a long time. Her mom grew up Catholic, and her dad was Adventist. So her mom, under her grandpa's leadership in their family, about the age 16, came into an understanding of the Sabbath. So by the time she had her children, which would be my wife and my sister-in-law, who I think just joined here, Cornerstone Connection, that'd be her. That's our school. But by the time she was old enough and had her family, that was something she taught since her kids were little. So it was a part of my wife's life the whole time. For me, it was so different, and I came into it, and as I started getting super excited about the Sabbath, having not been born into it, and it wasn't just something that I did all the time, but something that I really explored and chose to do for myself, I came into it with a heart that was just purely excited to have this time to dedicate to the Lord every week. And I would be working 80, 100 hours a week trying to pay for school, like during the summers and stuff, just like killing myself. That's every single day. And so, man, I was just exhausted by the time I came back to school for the semester. And I just immediately recognized that the reason this was given, God didn't need to rest. He didn't need to sleep. He didn't get tired after 6 days of creating. He did it as an example for us to follow because he knew we would need it, both physically and spiritually. And so I realized that right off the bat. What the challenge was for me was sharing this with people that I loved. Sharing it with my family, sharing it with mentors and friends. As I was so excited about it, other people were not. And so as I began to share it, they would call me a Pharisee, call me a legalist. There were just a lot of instances where I lost friends and certain family members that we struggled in that season. And it was a big deal for me. And so I had to begin to articulate what I was feeling in my heart about what the Sabbath was and what Isaiah 58 says that it is. Such a beautiful passage in reference to the Sabbath. If you keep your feet from going your own way, you don't speak your own words, but you talk about the Sabbath as a delight, then the Lord will give you the inheritance he promised your ancestor Jacob, right? So I had to defend what most people see the Sabbath as being very legalistic, very pharisaical, just a bunch of do's and don'ts, which you could apply to the whole law of God if you really wanted to, if you didn't really understand it, which they didn't. They had all the commandments, had them all memorized, but then murdered the God, Jesus, that the commandments were pointing to. Like, he is the law. Like the law exists. It's not something separate from him. It is a representation of his character, of his nature. And so people get that all so confused, and it's so sad. Through the years, I began to absorb the misplaced burden of feeling like I had to convince people. And that's just something that, you can't, like Mark Twain once said, you can't convince a man of something he thinks he already knows.
Right.
So there's so many people that just don't have hearts that are open and receptive. And, I pray that with the coming of the Great Tribulation, that the Lord will use that to make their hearts more open and receptive as he tears down the power of religion. But until then, I just got to trust that, and this is something that I've been learning even over the last few years, I have to be true and honest to the calling that the Lord has given me to share of all of these things and to share his truth and even above that, to love other people more than myself. underneath of my calling to love God. But to let it all go after that, there's cases where I get kind of down and discouraged because we'll just receive just nasty comments and emails and things online, and a lot of times I just let them go. I don't like delete them or restrict comments. Just let people say what they want, unless they're just totally just disturbing or blasphemous or whatever. But just to let those things go, and the Lord gives me affirmation when I get down, when I get frustrated, when I get discouraged. I'm like, man, is this even making an impact? Is this even doing anything? Like, we're putting this stuff out online. I'm using, my time and my breath and my life and my resources to share this message. Is it just pearls before swine? Is it just going out into the wind and it doesn't even matter? And every single time that happens, we will have somebody that will comment or share or send us a letter or something that is just raving about how, the ministry has blessed them in whatever way, how the videos have blessed them, or how they're changing, they're studying more about something else, or they're very open-hearted. And it's been really, really powerful. I know every time that is the Lord bringing me affirmation, bringing me encouragement to just keep the course, stay the course.
Yeah. Yeah, one thing I remembered in the Bible, listening to you saying that, is that Jesus, he told us to let our light shine. He didn't tell us to make it. Because...
Good point.
We just his light.
Yeah, that's true.
I've been in the whole Instagram debate scene a couple of years ago. My friends can tell you all about that. It would leave you exhausted, right? And just...
Totally.
Most of like, you know what? I'm done.
Yeah.
And so
we had a post recently. I posted on, sometimes I try to incorporate a little bit of like pointed comedy, not just be like a funny channel, but like things that are funny once in a while, but that make you think.
Right.
And they're supposed to start a conversation, and some of them are intentionally, aggressive, like to start a conversation. And obviously in the algorithms, when people comment and stuff, it boosts you in the algorithms. But, sometimes, like, okay, there was a post we did, what was it? It had to be 2 weeks ago now, maybe about 2 weeks, 10 days. And I did it on Tiger King because that's like such a big thing right now. And I haven't even seen a single episode of that. I hear that it's a little raunchy, like the language is, rough. It's not like super wholesome show, but it's so popular and it's on Netflix. And of course, with the quarantine, people are binge watching stuff and whatnot. So as I was just exploring things, I did a meme. And at the top, it said, if you're seeing more of this, and it showed a picture of Tiger King. And then in the middle, it says, then this, and then it shows a picture of the Bible. It says, you may be wasting your quarantine. Just trying to make people think, what am I watching? What am I spending my time doing? I need to be seeking the Lord's face in this time, not looking back and saying, hey, I wasted all that time that I had. And dude, it sparked we had no post that was as popular as that. I mean, without being boosted or without anything, our normal post will get our engagement rate will be, I don't know, around 4 or 5%, which is pretty good. 2 to 3 would be standard. 4, 5, 6 would be very marketer friendly. So high engagement. And that post it blew up. I mean, the engagement rate was off the charts. We had thousands of likes and comments and hundreds of comments and shares. And normally we get a few per post at our size right now. But people were just freaking out, and a lot of them that got on there were Wiccans and atheists and all these people just dogging religion and stuff. I'm like, what are y'all coming on here and trolling the page? Who cares? This wasn't meant for you. It was meant for people who claim to be believers. But right. It's just really interesting, the whole social media scene. I didn't engage with one person, not one single person, because it's exhausting. Like you said, completely right. Emotionally exhausting. You're not going to convince anyone of something that they think they already know. So that's the Spirit's responsibility, and I am learning to let the Spirit keep that responsibility, and I'm glad to.
Yeah, that's something that God has been taking me through the same learning process, because I've taught for the last 2 years at a private high school, and the kids live here. Some of the kids live here, some live in the community, but the first year I was here, I'm just like, man, you gotta learn this, you gotta believe this, you gotta accept it, and just kind of thing.
Yeah, force it.
And this year I'm just like, that's not working. What can I do that will work? And I'm just like, I've been presenting them with the information, trying not to force it on them, and their response has been a lot better. And some of these students come from homes that are rough, reason or another, and they learn to trust you more. And so
it's good. Yeah, being a teacher is that's a huge calling. You know, God bless you in that. My wife is a teacher, much younger kids, like preschool, kindergarten, first grade age, at the school that we run, and it's a lot. She says sometimes, man, I can't imagine teaching like middle school or high school or something like that. It'd be hard.
Yeah, I've being a high school teacher, it has its good moments and its not so good moments. You know, religion is my favorite subject to teach.
Sure.
And my wife teaches math and English, and she taught middle school for years. And
oh wow, at the same school she teaches?
No, not currently. Yeah, we've lived different places. We've Texas, Colorado, Illinois, and then back to Texas. And so I'm with you. I don't understand how the draw toward teach middle school, because I've subbed in that grade, and it's just no thank you.
Dude, I remember being so brutal to our teachers and our substitute teachers, just ruthless, man, heartless and brutal, and to other students too. I mean, it's a tough time of life. Like, people are trying to find themselves. There's like major physical and emotional changes happening. It's just, whoa.
We've noticed there's the 7th grade and 10th grade are the two biggest hormone changes of life. You know, those are when they out with a lot of their behavior problems and stuff.
Yeah.
And I stand here for some of our 10th graders, and it can get pretty crazy.
Yeah, dude, my face was just covered in acne. And all I wanted to do was, like, make fun of other people, felt like just to, like, lift myself up. So I was just kind of a bully, but I wasn't, like, cool enough or popular enough to be, like, a big bully, but just kind of just annoying, you know, and to the teachers, making fun. If the teacher was like single or something, I'd be like joking them about how they'll never get married, which must have been devastating, because now I'm at the age where there's women in my life that are single women looking for husbands, you know, especially Christian women wanting to find a good man and struggling to find one. And I mean, it's, you know, it's touchy. It's hard for people, and emotionally they want that companionship. And I remember I was so brutal. I tried to find some different people that were in my life and were really awesome teachers and awesome mentors, very kind, very supportive of me, and to reach out to them and just thank them, or to apologize for just being a jerk. But it's hard to track people down.
And it's kind of amazing the things that the Lord brings us through. You know, he and it's something I think about from time to time, is how we do these things, right? And we're mean to people at whatever stage of life. And you know, and God saw when He created Adam what was going to happen to the human race, and I think that process repeats for everyone who's born. You know, when you and I were born, it's like God saw the things we would go through, the sins we would commit, you know, the ways we would. And yet He still went through everything, all that suffering and the crucifixion and everything in order to redeem us.
Wow.
And so it's kind of mind-blowing when you think about it.
No doubt. Yeah. The love of God and the sacrifice of God, the Father, Son, the Holy Spirit, will be studied for eternity, and will just be just mind-boggling. That's one of the things that gets me most excited about heaven, because when I was a kid, I used to think, oh, heaven's going to be so boring. Like, I had anxiety about going to heaven, and I was like, how can you, like, live forever, like, sitting on a cloud, playing a harp? You know, how can, like, it's going to be so boring. I was worried about living forever and, like, the boredom that would come with eternity. And it wasn't until, and this was when I was very young, it wasn't until my relationship with God began to bloom and blossom, and I was seeking His face and tasting and seeing that the Lord was good. And then I realized, oh, God is eternal. So every time I get these, like, sensations, I learn something new about Him, or like a new way that Scripture, like, reveals his kindness or His nature. I get so excited, like, wow, God, you're so good. And I realize every moment in heaven will be like that, but amplified exponentially forever. And there'll never be a moment where we're like, hey, I've arrived. I have arrived at the understanding of the fullness of the goodness and the love of God. There's no more else to know of him. There will always be more to know of the character of God, and he will continue to reveal himself to us in marvelous ways. And so that just changed my whole perspective, and just it excites me. There's a lot of hope in that for me.
Yeah, it's the way I like how Mark Lowry said it. The most interesting thing is God, and
that's profound.
And it's crazy to think that, like you just said, all eternity will be just studying God's character, and we'll never come to the end of it. So
good.
The Bible tells us that we can't even begin to imagine what He has prepared for us. It told us certain understand in our finite brains, but enough to get us to get that appetite going. If I could use that phrase.
Yeah, for sure.
So,
hey, we got somebody join us there from Zambia. I'm not sure if that's one of your followers or mine, but that's pretty cool. Shout out to my boy there from Zambia. I got a few friends that are over in Gambia, and so they usually tune into our channel for different things. But I don't know if I've seen Zambia before. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, I've watched from Zambia, New Zealand. It's really cool. My best friend lives in Guyana, so when he can, he'll join the
for sure. When there's not like a crazy time difference or something like that.
He's only for there. It's only about an hour or two ahead.
Okay, yeah.
Not too much different.
No.
We have a friend in Japan. She's a military wife, so her husband's stationed there, but they're 14 hours ahead, I think.
Wow, that's crazy. 14 hours, man. I remember flying to Germany a few years back and just staying up like the whole night to try to transition my body into the new time zone, because we were going to be there like I think 20 days or 21 days or something like that. And it's just crazy. And the way that technology can just connect us, all over the world. It wasn't that long ago that it would be a huge deal to be able to broadcast globally and to connect with people globally. But I mean, we ran a few ads for the sexual addiction class we did, and just, did a little bit of marketing to beef it up. And I mean, boom, 600 registrations from more than 25 countries. And we're nobody, like in the school. We're not some like huge ministry. We're not even affiliated with the church. Like, we don't have the backing of people tithing or what. It's just when God puts it on people's hearts to give. And honestly, the way that I started doing this was about 2 years ago now, not quite 2 years. July will be 2 years. I was a worship leader at a Lutheran church here in the greater Austin area. And I won't even say the name because I don't want to disparage anyone and leaders there, that I respect and stuff. But I was fired from that job for theological differences, basically. And part of that was the Sabbath. Part of it was my understanding of the Trinity. Part of it was just a few different things. And I had been working there for 6 years. And all of these things were on the table before I ever even took the job. So it wasn't that like, it just came up. And like, Chris believes this stuff that's like not Lutheran. They found me because I went to the Lutheran college, but I never proclaimed to be Lutheran and wasn't a member of the Lutheran church. And they were okay with that. Because we could keep the main thing, which was ministering to people and worshiping Jesus. We were aligned on those major issues, and so it wasn't a big deal to them. But eventually what happened was, and I could say this with relative confidence, somebody's job was threatened because somebody disagreed with some of the things that I believed, and I wasn't even teaching on it much or anything. But someone kind of, whatever they came to understand or discover, because I was speaking somewhere else and they saw the video or something like that, I think. And they brought to somebody in the church and they were like, hey, if you don't get rid of this guy, like, because of these weird beliefs, we're going to go to the synod and let them know that, like, you're employing, like heretics in your church. And so I think because of that pressure, I was let go, and I was told that essentially that was why. And So after that season, I just wasn't sure what I was going to do. I was the church was gracious, and they put me on severance for a little while where I could kind of look for something else. And during that time, I had someone anonymously speak with someone that I'm close to, one of my mentors, and they anonymously reached out to them and said, "Hey, we heard that Chris was no longer leading worship, that he's looking for a job. He's not sure what he's going to do." And I had started a business, and I had done a few different things in this season of like a few months or whatever. And this person reached out anonymously and said, "Hey, we want to basically like donate money to this ministry," which was just on paper. Like it had been formed legally by a mentor of mine, but it wasn't doing anything. Like it wasn't active. It just had been formed, nothing ever done with it. So it was an existing entity, but with no face, no website, no nothing. And so they reached out to this person and said, "Hey, we want to donate this money to basically employ or contract Chris for a year to start doing like video teachings and design a website." And I have a little bit of technological experience and things like that. So they offered me the number that they offered me to do this for a year because I still had to support my family and stuff. Ended up being the exact amount that I had discussed with my wife. Hey, if I take another job, this is what the minimum would need to be for me to feel comfortable, like supporting my family. If I'm looking at other career paths or whatever, I don't know if I'm just gonna be a worship leader forever. I don't know. And so the number that was offered with no I hadn't communicated that to anyone except my wife, and she hadn't communicated it to anyone. And it ended up being the exact number. So I was like, wow, God, that was the bottom number that I said, but I mean, it was in the range, so there you go. And so, I mean, so generous, this lady, I mean, to fund somebody's salary basically for a year. And so we got to the end of that first year and seemed like the Lord was really using this. And this lady anonymously just stepped up and said, "Hey, let's do another year and just see where it goes." So now I'm in the midst of that second year, and now the Lord has moved to where, and this is what I have always prayed to God, "Lord, make my income sustainable where I don't just have to go and punch a clock at a job for 40 hours a week. I want to give you the lion's share of my time, but I have to be able to still provide for my family." So I'm just praying this with a sincere heart. God, I don't care about being rich. I don't care about making money. I don't care about all this stuff, but I need to provide for my family. And I want to be able to give you like the majority of my time and like do ministry and stuff, but not have to be begging churches or whoever to pay me. So I said, "Lord, if you will do that, I will just continue to serve you." And now he's provided other opportunities for me through business and different things to make money so that now I could continue doing this stuff with Faith Ministries, even if I didn't need to make a check anymore. So I'm just very grateful for that and for the Lord's provision because it's 100% his hand. I mean, we've never asked for $1. We don't request in any of my videos and anything. I never mentioned donating anything. And so my prayer is, Lord, if as long as you want this ministry to continue, you have to sustain it. I'm not going to ask for money. I'm not going to pass the plate. We're not a church, but you bring in the funds and we'll do it. And when that day comes, if that day comes where there's no more, then the well is dry, then I'm done, because this is not my choice to do this kind of thing. Like it's challenging, honestly. It's very challenging at times, and being a pastor or a preacher or evangelist is not like the life that people would naturally like choose for comfort or for luxury. It's not natural, but it is something that when the Lord calls you to do it, there's nothing else you can do and be happy. Right. And that's what I share with my friends who are entering ministry and wanting to be pastors and stuff. And there's even like a trendy thing in the church about I'm going to become a pastor and like have all these like quotable like Twitter quotes and stuff, like be all trendy and whatnot. And I tell them, I'm like, do not go into ministry unless you know that there's nothing else you can do. And that's a calling. Otherwise, you're just trying to make money, you're trying to do whatever. And I mean, hey, it's your life, go for it. But if you say, the Lord is calling me to ministry, that means you cannot satisfactorily do anything else with your life and be happy. You know that that's a calling.
Right. Yeah, I've always heard the same thing.
It's good.
So it's not because, a lot of people don't make much. Working at the school I work at, it's self-supporting, and finances aren't always there. So
sure, yeah.
Yeah, it's process, the trusting in God process, and He's never let us down. So,
Amen.
and that's when you know it's the Lord's will, is He makes it happen.
Yeah.
One of my favorite ministries is called Shepherd's Call Ministries, and their startup story is just, this guy was asked to sing, and then he was asked to speak, and he's never had to solicit for places to go do ministry. He's always getting requests to go somewhere in the world.
Wow, that's cool.
And so, yeah, I just realized how my shirt looks.
How does it look? I can't tell.
It's got the one word. It's a Porn Kills love shirt, but all you can see.
Yeah, that's so funny. Yeah, because like the video, it like chops off things when you do with two people.
So stand up a little bit.
Yeah, just for the record, you gotta. Yeah, that's good.
Video this morning, YouTube channel, and put it up wearing this shirt, and I realized that for part of the video you can only see that word.
You need like a lower third banner or something. It's like the channel name or whatnot.
I tried that. I tried putting my subscribe button right there, and I couldn't move it. And I just put it in the description, like this is what the shirt says.
Yeah. Just for the people who are, before you comment.
So
that's brutal.
But I love. This is from Fight the New Drug, which is a completely secular organization.
And what's it called? I missed it there.
Fight the New Drug.
Okay.
And it's all they do is sexual recovery stuff.
Wow, that's cool.
Completely, as secular as it is, it seems it's almost very biblical. At the same time, just because it's very non-judgmental. It's very, hey, we can help you get through this.
Yeah. That's kind of like NA or AA or something. Like it's not exactly spiritual, but the principles are.
Exactly, the principle is there, and so. That's what I like wearing this shirt around. I like the comments I get sometimes, and
yeah, that's bold, man. Yeah, anytime you bring up porn, woo. I mean, the studies show over 78% of men in the church and over 55% of pastors in the church are struggling with pornography addiction, but yet it's such a taboo thing. I talk about it like if you went and you sat in like a help group and people are, it's real, the Spirit's there and the Spirit's moving and people are feeling, open to sharing. And so one guy stands up and he's like, hey, let's talk about like what we're struggling with. Like, let's just be real honest and pray with each other. And one person's like, hey, I'm an alcoholic. I drink when nobody's looking. I struggle with this, and I keep going back to it. And they're like, yes, let's pray for you. Like, let the Lord bring healing. Or like this person that, hey, I do meth or I do cocaine or whatever it is, some hard drug, and they're like, oh, let's pray for that. But then you stand up and you say, oh, I'm a sex addict. Or like, I'm addicted to pornography or whatever. Now, people get so uncomfortable with that, particularly. And the enemy has made it so taboo. That's why I think it's so dope that you're wearing that shirt, because it's like the enemy's made it something that you don't want to talk about. You don't want to, it's too scary. It's too weird. Nobody else is struggling with this. He's like lying to men in the church and saying, and all the while he's stealing the spiritual authority from men in the church. And people ask me, they get onto the thing about like women and women pastors, and I think the Adventist Church just went through like a discussion about women pastors, and it's a huge thing right now. It's a raging debate. You bring that up, the comment section will fill up in like 2 seconds. But when people try to go there, and it's like, okay, yeah, I do have a position on that, and yeah, we can discuss it. But first, let's just step back and say, why are all of these women filling all of these positions? And the reason is because men have failed in their calling to spiritual authority. They failed in the home, in their marriages, they failed their children, they failed in ministry. And a lot of men, I believe, this is just a personal belief, I believe one of the reasons we see such issues with sexuality in the church. I mean, look at the Catholic Church, and the priests, come out and they abused all these little boys, and like it's just so sick and so mind-boggling. And you say, how could that be in the church? Like, these are men of God, but I believe that these men struggle with these things. They struggle with pornography. They struggle with habitual masturbation. They struggle with things becoming increasingly dark for them and their minds becoming so skewed. And they know this and they love God, but they can't find the way out. So they basically make a deal with God. Hey, if I go into ministry, that's and they may not even say this, but subconsciously, like, oh, if I go into ministry, then that will appease, God's wrath against me and my guilt and my shame that I feel like I can do something extreme. Just like I took a month off of doing music. People are like, Chris, why aren't you playing music? I'm like, let's not talk about it. So they basically go into ministry, but instead of it being a solution, they just carry that darkness with them because they don't have healing, they don't have repentance, and it's a challenge. And so we have these issues in the church where men have failed. You have the whole thing of like pastors' kids. It's a whole thing. Like, how is that a thing? PKs. Growing up, I knew if I wanted to be promiscuous with a girl, the one I would find is the pastor's kid, because she'll be the most wild, she'll be the most crazy, she'll be the most promiscuous. And like, why is that a thing? Because pastors' kids, the Bible even talks about it. You know this. How they should be, in their home and what their home should look like, what their children should look like. So how's that a thing? And you realize because men dedicate themselves to their ministries as if that were their primary calling, when in reality, it's their home. It's their wife first, it's their children, and then their ministry comes after that. So because of the failure in the family structure, I believe we've started seeing this huge rise of women filling these positions, whether it's right or wrong. I'm not going to get into that right now for another conversation. But just looking at the why that has happened is enough for me to say, man, I got to stand up. I got to be the man of my family. And that doesn't mean just, making money or whatever. Like, that means spiritually. In this house, we will serve the Lord. I will teach my children the ways of God. And not just to like follow them, but because we love God, we love who he is, and we love his ways. And it's the best, most safe, most pleasurable way to live.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's a very good point. So Instagram has given us it's a 1 minute warning now.
Oh, okay. I didn't realize there was a thing.
Yeah, and it's I think they cap you off at an hour. So.
Okay, I always wonder why my streams when I do like worship just. Anyways, we got to roll, dude. It was good talking with you. Thank you so much for having me. Would love to talk again sometime, or maybe have you on our channel sometime.
Yeah, sure. And anytime I can support those recovery programs, send me a video, send me a post. It's anything I can repost on my account. I'll be happy to do that, because that's a big passion of mine as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
I want to see men recover from these things, and as women as well, because they struggle a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, man. And same thing, vice versa. We're happy to promote stuff, and let me know if there's something that's important or that you're really focusing on, and we'll be happy to work with you on that.
All right. So thank you for...
Yeah.
I'll talk to you later.
God bless you, man. See you later.